Eva Crow knelt on the cracked earth, her wedding ring trembling between her fingers as she placed it before the Comanche war chief. The gold caught the dying light like a prayer made manifest. "Take me," she whispered, her voice barely reaching. "The mounted warriors. I trade myself for one meal." The words hung in the desert air. Around her, horses stamped and shifted. Leather creaked. The men spoke in voices like wind through stone. She had walked for 3 weeks. Her feet were wrapped in torn fabric. Her dress hung in tatters. The sun had burned her dark skin darker still, and her lips were split like dried clay. The war. Chief dismounted. His face was weathered bronze, marked by years of sun and conflict. He studied her with eyes that held no cruelty, only calculation. She knew what she looked like. A broken woman. A runaway. Something to be used and discarded. But she was beyond caring. Behind him, an older woman slid from her horse. Silver threads wove through her black braids. She carried herself with the quiet authority of one who had seen much death and much birth. The woman knelt beside Eva. Her hands were gentle as she lifted Eva's chin, studying her face. She spoke to the war chief. In their language, her tone measured. Eva's vision blurred. The ground seemed to tilt beneath her. The last thing she remembered was strong arms lifting her from the dust. She woke to the smell of sage and wood smoke. A hide tent stretched above her, painted with symbols she did not recognize. The older woman sat beside her, spooning thin broth. Between her lips, the liquid was warm. It tasted of meat and unfamiliar herbs. Eva's stomach cramped with gratitude. "Slowly," the woman said in accented English. "Too fast, you sick again." Eva tried to sit up. The world spun like a child's top. "Where am I? Safe." The word felt foreign. Eva could not remember the last time anyone had used it about her. The woman continued feeding her small sips. Her movements were precise, economical. The hands that held the bowl were scarred from years of work, but they moved with surprising grace. "My name is Comanche. You are in the camp of my brother, Tachawika." Eva's mind struggled to hold the unfamiliar sounds. The war chief. Yes. "When do I start working?" Comanche's eyebrows rose slightly. "Working? I traded myself for food." Eva's voice cracked. "I belong to you now." The older woman set down the bowl. She reached for Eva's hands, turning them palm up. Her fingers traced the calluses there, the soft spots, the places where different kinds of labor had left their marks. "These are not the hands of a field worker." Eva tried to pull away, but Comanche's grip was firm. "You have secrets." It was not a question. Eva closed her eyes. Even here, even after trading herself for scraps, she could not escape the weight of what she had been, what she had known, what had gotten Samuel killed. "I can read," she whispered. Comanche was silent for a long moment. Outside, Eva could hear the sounds of camp life. Children laughing, dogs barking. The ordinary music of people going about their daily business. "That is why they killed your husband." Eva's eyes snapped open. "How did you know about Samuel?" "You wear mourning. You speak of trading yourself, but you have the look of someone who has lost everything." Comanche's voice was matter of fact. "And you have the hands of someone who held books as much as she held tools." Tears came then, hot and bitter. Eva had not cried since burying her infant son beside the river. The sobs shook her shoulders like fever. Comanche did not offer comfort. She simply sat, her presence steady as stone. When Eva's tears finally stopped, Comanche spoke again. "My brother says you are not our slave. You are Momowaraka now. What does that mean?" "Black Eagle woman." Eva touched her face, feeling the sharp angles hunger had carved there. "I don't understand." "You traded yourself for food, not for chains. Eagles do not belong in cages." Through the tent opening, Eva could see the war chief speaking with other men. His voice carried the authority. of someone accustomed to being obeyed, but there was no harshness in it. What happens now? Now you learn our ways. You find your place among us. Quinai stood, brushing dust from her buckskin dress. But first, you must decide if you want to stay. Stay? You are not our prisoner, Mawawaraka. You are our guest. If you choose to leave, we will give you supplies and point you toward the nearest settlement. The offer hung between them like smoke. Ava stared at the tent wall, painted with images of horses and eagles and vast stretches of sky. For months, she had moved through the world like a ghost, invisible to some, hunted by others. She had forgotten what it felt like to be seen as fully human. And if I stay? Then you become one of us. You learn our language, our customs. You earn your place through service to the people. Ava thought of the world she had left behind, the world that had taken Samuel, that had let her baby die of hunger, that had driven her to walk into the wilderness with nothing but desperation and dying hope. I will stay. Quinai nodded as if she had expected no other answer. Then, tomorrow your education begins. That night, Eva lay on soft furs and listened to the sounds of the camp settling into sleep. Somewhere in the darkness, a flute played a melody that seemed to speak of vast distances and infinite sky. She pressed her palm to her chest, feeling her heartbeat steady and strong. For the first time in months, she was not afraid to close her eyes. The ring that had bought her this chance lay beside her bed, returned by Tashawika without explanation. It caught the firelight like a promise. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new words to learn, new customs to navigate. But tonight, she was Mama Orica, and she was safe. Outside, the wind whispered through the grass with the voice of possibility. Eva woke to the sound of women's voices. The sun painted the tent walls amber. Her body ached less today, the hunger finally quiet in her bones. Quinai entered carrying a bundle of clothes. Buckskin dress, soft as prayer. Moccasins that would let her feet remember what it felt like to walk without pain. Come, the other women wait. Ava dressed slowly. The unfamiliar garments felt like borrowed skin. Outside, 4 women sat around a fire, grinding corn in stone. Bowls. Their hands moved in steady rhythm, ancient as heartbeat. They looked up when Eva approached. No hostility in their faces, but no warmth either. She was still unproven. Still foreign. Quinai handed her a bowl and showed her the motion. Press and turn. Press and turn. The corn kernels surrendered their hardness grain by grain. Your hands are soft, said one of the women. Her name was Ayana, and she was perhaps 20 summers. Old, beautiful in the way of unbroken things. Ava's fingers fumbled with the stone pestle. The other women's hands were sure, efficient. Hers felt clumsy and weak. I did different work before. What kind of work? Eva's throat tightened. Housework. Cooking. Cleaning. It was not a lie, but it was not the whole truth either. Ayana's eyes narrowed slightly. You speak well for a house servant. The grinding stopped. The silence stretched. Between them like a held breath. Ava kept working, pressing the corn with more force than necessary. The stone scraped against stone, harsh and grating. Some learn to speak properly, Quinai said mildly. It is not forbidden. But Eva felt the weight of their attention, the questions they were not asking aloud. Days passed in careful learning. Ava memorized words for common things. Water, fire, horse, sky. She helped with cooking, with tending the sick, with mending clothes torn by wind and use. Her fingers remembered how to be gentle with broken things. The children were easiest. They accepted her presence without question, drawn by her willingness to listen to their chatter. She learned their names, their games, their small fears about storms and strange sounds in the night. But the adults watched her with measuring eyes, especially Quinai. Ava felt those dark eyes following her movements, noting how she held a needle, how she sorted herbs. How she turned her head when someone spoke in their language, catching meaning before the words were translated. It was Quinai who finally cornered her. They were alone in the medicine lodge, grinding willow bark for pain remedies. The work was familiar to Ava's hands. Too familiar. "You know this plant," Quinai said. "You taught me yesterday." "No, you knew before." Ava's pestle stilled. Outside, horses whinnied, and men called to each other in voices rough with laughter. "Where did you learn healing?" The question hung between them like smoke from a dying fire. Ava thought of Mama Eula, the old woman who had taught her in secret. Whispered lessons in the slave quarters about which plants stopped bleeding, which ones eased birth pains, which ones could kill if used wrong. Dangerous knowledge for a slave to possess. "There was an old woman," Ava said finally. "She knew. Plants, she taught me some things. This old woman. She taught you to read too?" Ava's hands went still. The willow bark scattered across the grinding stone like fragments of broken promises. "How did you know?" "Your eyes move when you see marks on things. You read the symbols on the medicine bundles. You think I do not notice, but I see." The tent walls seemed to press closer. Ava's breath came short and shallow. "It got my husband. Killed." The words fell like stones into still water. Quinai set down her pestle. Her scarred hands folded in her lap, patient as winter earth. "Tell me," so Eva told her. About the master's daughter who had taught her letters in secret. About Samuel, who had been so hungry for knowledge he would risk everything to learn. About the other slaves who gathered in the dark to hear. Eva read from smuggled books. About the night they were discovered. About Samuel's body hanging from the old oak tree, turning slow in the morning wind. About her baby, who had died of hunger during their desperate flight north. When she finished, the silence was complete. Even the sounds from outside seemed muted, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Quinai reached across the space between them. Her fingers traced the scars on Eva's wrists, the marks left by ropes and chains. "You think this knowledge is a curse. It killed everyone I loved. No, fear killed them, hatred killed them. The knowledge was just an excuse." Quinai stood and moved to a bundle of hides hanging from the tent poles. She unwrapped them carefully, revealing sheets of bark covered in symbols. "These are winter counts. The history of our people, written in marks and pictures. Each year, we choose the most important event and record it here." She pointed to a specific symbol. "This is the year the horses came. This is the year of the great drought. This is the year my first son was born." Eva stared at the markings. They were not letters as she knew them, but they were writing all the same. History captured and preserved. Among the people, knowledge is sacred. Those who can capture wisdom in marks are honored, not feared. The white world sees it differently. This is not the white world. Quinai rolled the hides carefully and rewrapped them. "You have been given a gift, Moawarika. The spirits do not give such gifts lightly." She turned back to Ava, her eyes bright with something that might have been hope. "Will you teach me your marks?" Ava's throat constricted. "I cannot." "Why?" "Because everyone who learns dies." The words came out broken, raw with old grief. Quinai knelt beside her. "Look at me." Ava raised her eyes reluctantly. "I am not afraid of marks on bark. I am not afraid of knowledge. I am afraid of ignorance. Of losing our stories when the old ones die." She gestured toward the wrapped winter counts. "Our way of recording is good, but it is not enough. The white soldiers keep records in their marks. They make treaties in marks we cannot read. They steal our land with marks we cannot understand. The truth of it settled between them like dust after a storm. If you teach me, I can teach others. We can protect ourselves with the same weapons they use against us." Eva thought of Samuel, who had believed the same thing, who had died believing it. But she also thought of the children who played around the campfires. Of Tashawicca, who treated her with dignity. Of this woman who called her knowledge sacred instead of dangerous. "I will teach you," she whispered. Quinai smiled then, the first real smile Eva had seen from her. "Good, we begin tomorrow." That night, Eva lay on her sleeping furs and listened to the camp settling into darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a flute played a melody that spoke of old sorrows and new possibilities. Her fingers traced patterns in the air, spelling out words in the language of her birth. For the first time since Samuel's death, the letters felt like hope instead of weapons. Outside, the wind carried the scent of sage and distant rain. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new fears to overcome. But tonight, her gift was wanted instead of feared. Tonight, she was no longer alone with her dangerous knowledge. The darkness held promise now. The lessons began at dawn. Eva scratched letters in the dirt with a pointed stick while Quinai watched with the intensity of a hunter tracking prey. The alphabet took shape grain by grain, each symbol a small revolution. "This is Eva whispered, her finger tracing the simple lines. "It makes the sound at the beginning of Ayana's name." Quinai repeated the sound, her tongue working around the unfamiliar shapes. Her hands copied the marks with surgical precision. Within days, other women gathered to watch. They sat in a careful circle, pretending to work on beadwork or hide tanning while their eyes tracked Eva's moving stick. The children were bolder. They drew letters in the dust with their toes, making games of the strange marks. Eva found herself smiling for the first time in months. But not everyone approved. Ayana watched from a distance, her beautiful face marked by something that might have been fear or jealousy. She had been the camp's most sought-after woman before Eva arrived. Now the men spoke of the Black Eagle woman who carried magic in her fingertips. "She changes too much too fast," Ayana murmured to her friend Hyana. "The old ways are good ways." Eva heard the whispers but said nothing. She had learned the weight of silence, the way it could protect or condemn depending on how it was wielded. The real test came with the horses. Nahakoa worked with them every day, his hands gentle on their necks, his voice low and musical. He was perhaps 25 summers, built lean and strong from years of riding. His eyes held the quiet intelligence of someone who understood the language of living things. Eva found herself watching him. The way he moved, the way he spoke to the animals as if they were old friends, the way he sometimes looked at her across the fire, his gaze lingering just a moment too long. He began teaching her to ride. His hands on her waist as he lifted her onto the horse's back were careful, respectful, but she felt the warmth of them through the buckskin. "Breathe with the horse," he said in his soft English. "Feel her heart. Match your rhythm to hers." Eva's body remembered fear. The last time she had ridden, she was running from bloodhounds and burning cotton. But Nahakoa's presence was steady as stone, and gradually she relaxed into the animal's gait. They rode in comfortable silence, the prairie stretching endlessly around them. The sky was bigger here than anywhere she had ever been. It made her feel small and infinite at the same time. "You ride like someone who has run far," Nahakoa said eventually. "I have. The running is over now." The words settled between them like a promise. But promises, Eva had learned, were fragile things. The riders appeared on the horizon 3 days later. A war party moving fast, their horses' hooves drumming against the earth. Tashawicca called for the scouts, his voice sharp with concern. Eva stood with the other women, watching the approaching dust cloud. Something cold moved in her chest. The leader was a man called Paha, his face painted for war. He rode with the arrogance of someone who had never learned to doubt his own power. "Brother," he called to Tashawicca, "we come for tribute." "You are welcome to food and rest," Tashawicca replied. "But we owe you nothing." Poha's eyes swept the camp, taking inventory. They lingered on Eva, noting her difference, her foreignness. You harbor strange animals now, he said. Perhaps this makes you weak. The insult hung in the air like smoke from a poisoned fire. Eva felt the weight of every gaze. She had brought danger to these people who had shown her kindness. Her presence made them vulnerable. That night, the two groups camped separately. Poha's warriors made loud jokes and drank fermented mare's milk until their voices grew rough and careless. Eva could not sleep. She walked to the edge of camp, where the darkness pressed close and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. Nahakoa found her there. You blame yourself, he said. I am a burden. You are family. The word hit her like a physical blow. Family. Something she had not dared to hope for again. Poha will not forget this camp, she said. He will come back. Yes, when? Soon? Tomorrow night, maybe. He will wait until we sleep, then take what he wants. Eva turned to face him. How do you know? Because it is what I would do. The admission hung between them, honest and brutal. Samuel taught me about military tactics, Eva said quietly. Your husband was a soldier? For a time, before we married. He said armies always follow patterns. They do the same things because they work. Nahakoa was quiet for a long moment. What patterns do you see? Eva closed her eyes, remembering Samuel's lessons. The way he had drawn battle formations in the dirt, showing her how men moved in groups, how they thought as one mind. They will come from the south. The wind blows from the north tonight, so they will use it to carry their scent away from the horses. They will strike just before dawn, when people sleep deepest. How many? 12 men. They will divide into 3 groups. 4 to stampede the horses, 4 to raid the food stores. 4 to take prisoners. Nahakoa stared at her. You speak with certainty. I speak with experience. She told him then about the night raids she had survived. About watching from hiding places as men with guns and torches destroyed everything she had tried to build. About learning to read the signs of approaching violence. We must warn Tashawika, Nahakoa said. He will not believe me. He will believe me. They walked back to camp together, their footsteps silent on the soft earth. The fire had burned down to coals, and most of the tribes slept under the vast canopy of stars. Tashawika listened to their warning with the stillness of deep water. His eyes moved from Nahakoa to Eva, measuring, calculating. You are certain of this? As certain as sunrise, Eva said. He nodded once, sharply. Then we prepare. The next hour passed in careful activity. Warriors woke without sound, their movements economical and precise. Weapons were checked, horses were moved to safer ground. Children were gathered in the center of camp where they could be protected. Eva found herself assigned to guard duty with 3 warriors. One of them handed her a knife, his face neutral. You know how to use this? Yes, it was not a lie. She had learned many things during her months of running. The attack came exactly as she had predicted. Just before dawn, when the sky was gray and the stars were fading, the sound of hoofbeats rolled across the prairie like distant thunder. But this time, they were ready. Tashawika's men met the raiders at the camp's edge. The fight was brief, brutal, and decisive. Poha's warriors, expecting surprise, found prepared resistance instead. Eva crouched behind a supply wagon, her knife ready, her heart hammering against her ribs. She watched Nahakoa move through the chaos with fluid grace, his bow singing as he sent arrows toward their targets. No one died. That was important to remember later. But several of Poha's men nursed wounds that would remind them of their failure. When the defeated raiders limped away, Tashawika stood in the center of camp and spoke words that Eva did not need translated. The other warriors looked at her with new eyes, not suspicion now, but respect. She had proved herself, not just as a member of the tribe, but as a protector of it. Quinai found her sitting beside the dying fire, her hands shaking with leftover fear. You saved us, the medicine woman said simply. I saved myself. You just happened to be nearby. But they both knew it was more than that. Ava had found something worth protecting, something worth fighting for. For the first time since Samuel's death, she felt useful, necessary, part of something larger than her own survival. The sun rose over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Ava watched it climb, feeling its warmth on her face. She belonged here now, not as a guest or a refugee, but as a defender. The realization settled in her chest like a coal that would burn forever. The victory over Pahai changed everything. Ava felt it in the way warriors nodded to her around the fire, in the way mothers let their children sit closer when she told stories, in the way Tashawika sought her counsel about the movements of distant riders. But the greatest change was in Nahakoa's eyes. He found reasons to be near her, teaching her to braid horsehair into rope, showing her the best places to gather healing plants, walking beside her when the tribe moved to new grazing grounds. Their conversations were spare, weighted with meaning that lived in the spaces between words. "Your husband was a good teacher," he said one evening as they watched the horses graze. "He was a good man. You loved him." Ava's fingers stilled on the rope she was braiding. "Yes, the heart has room for many loves." The words hung between them like heat shimmer over summer grass. Ava looked at him then, really looked. Saw the patience in his dark eyes, the way he held himself ready to step back if she wished it. Saw the scars on his hands from years of working with wild things. "I am broken," she said quietly. "We are all broken. The question is whether we break in useful ways." That night, she lay awake listening to the wind move through the grass. Somewhere in the darkness, a night bird called to its mate. The sound was lonely and beautiful at the same time. She thought of Samuel, of the promises they had made beside their marriage fire, of the child they had lost, the dreams that had died with him, of the woman she had been before grief carved her hollow. But she also thought of the woman she was becoming, Mue Waraka, who could read the intentions of enemies and the healing properties of plants, who had found family among strangers and purpose in protecting them. The morning brought new lessons. Ava worked with Quine to prepare medicines for the coming winter. Her hands moved with growing confidence, measuring and mixing according to ancient knowledge. "You learn quickly," Quine observed. "I have good teachers. You have good instincts. There is difference." Iva smiled at that. It was true. The work felt natural to her fingers, as if she had been born to it. Ayana appeared in the doorway of the medicine lodge, her beautiful face carefully composed. "Quinai, my grandmother asks for pain medicine. Her joints ache with the changing weather." "Of course." Quinai began gathering herbs, her movements efficient and sure. Ava continued her work, aware of Ayana's presence, but not acknowledging it. The young woman had grown increasingly cold as Ava's status in the tribe rose. "You have settled in well," Ayana said, her voice pleasant on the Fundu surface. "The people have been generous." "Yes, we are known for our hospitality." Ayana's eyes moved to the letters Ava had been practicing on a piece of bark. "Even to those who bring strange customs." Ava's hands stilled. "Learning is not strange. Learning white ways might be." The words carried an edge sharp as flint. Quinai looked up from her herb gathering. "Knowledge belongs to no one people. It flows where it will, like water finding the lowest ground. Water can also flood," Ayana replied. "It can wash away what was there before." Eva felt the weight of the accusation. She had indeed brought change to the camp. Some welcomed it, others feared it. "I do not seek to replace anything," Ava said carefully. "Only to add what small help I can." "And what of Nahakoa? Do you seek to add yourself to his life as well?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a green fire. Eva met Ayana's gaze steadily. "That is between Nahakoa and me, is it?" I thought it might be between Nahakoa and the woman his family expected him to marry. The medicine lodge fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause in its endless movement. Across the grass, Queen finished measuring herbs and wrapped them in soft leather. The heart chooses its own path, she said mildly. Expectations are like clouds. They come and go, but the sky remains. She handed the medicine to Ayana. Give this to your grandmother. 1 pinch in hot water, morning and evening. Ayana took the package, her fingers tight around the leather. Thank you. After she left, Eva stared at the letters she had been practicing. The marks seemed to blur together, meaningless as scattered twigs. She loves him, Eva said quietly. Yes, she is beautiful. Young, unburdened by the past. Yes, she belongs here in ways I never will. Kui set down her grinding stone. Do you wish to leave? The question cut deeper than Eva expected. Leave. Return to the world that had never wanted her. Give up the first real home she had found since Samuel's death. No. Then stop speaking of what you are not and start speaking of what you are. Eva looked up at the older woman. What am I? You are the woman who saved this camp. Who teaches our children new ways of capturing knowledge. Who makes my brother smile for the first time since his first wife died. The last words hit Eva like a physical blow. Nahakoa was married 3 summers ago. She died in childbirth, along with their son. Understanding flooded through Eva. The careful way Nahakoa had approached her, the patience in his eyes, the recognition of shared loss. He knows grief, she whispered. Yes, as you do. That evening, Eva found Nahakoa working with a young stallion in the horse corral. The animal was nervous, skittish, but Nahakoa's hands were gentle as he worked to earn its trust. He is beautiful, Eva said, settling onto the fence rail. He is frightened. Someone treated him roughly before he came to us. Will he learn to trust again? Nahakoa's eyes met hers. If he is shown that not all hands bring pain. They watched the horse together, neither speaking. The animal gradually relaxed under Nahakoa's patient touch, its ears moving forward, its breathing growing calm. Ayana spoke to me today, Eva said finally. I know. She believes you belong together. Ayana believes many things. Eva turned to face him. Do you? Nahakoa's hand stilled on the horse's neck. I believe the heart knows what it needs. Mine has been empty for 3 years. Until now. The words settled between them like warmth from a banked fire. I am afraid, Eva admitted. Of what? Of loving again. Of losing again. Of not being worthy of what you offer. Nahakoa stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. I am afraid of the same things, he said softly. Fear means we understand what we stand to lose. His hand covered hers on the fence rail. Warm, calloused, steady as stone. But I am more afraid of letting fear choose for me. That night, they walked together through the camp. Not touching, but close enough that their shadows merged on the ground. Around them, the tribe settled into evening rhythms. Children played. Quiet games. Elders told stories around the central fire. Eva felt the weight of watching eyes. Some approving, some curious, some hostile. But for the first time, she found she did not care. She belonged here. Not because she had asked permission, but because she had earned her place through service and sacrifice. If that meant making enemies, so be it. The next morning brought riders on the horizon, but these were not Comanche warriors. These were white men in blue uniforms, their brass buttons catching the early light. Ava's blood turned to ice water in her veins. The U.S. Army had found them. Tashawika called for the scouts, his voice sharp with concern. Warriors gathered their weapons while women began moving the children to safety. Eva stood frozen, watching the approaching soldiers. Their leader rode with the straight-backed posture of career military. His eyes swept the camp with the calculating gaze of a man accustomed to violence. "They come for you," Quine said quietly beside her. "Yes, will you go with them?" Eva thought of the world she had left behind, of masters and overseers and the smell of burning cotton, of Samuel's body turning slowly in the morning wind. "I would rather die. That might be arranged." The words carried weight that made Eva's throat constrict. Everything she had built here, everyone she had come to love, all of it balanced on the edge of a knife blade. The soldiers drew closer, their horses' hooves drumming against the earth in steady rhythm. Eva closed her eyes and tried to prepare for the end of everything. The soldiers stopped 50 yards from the camp's edge. Their leader, dismounted with practiced efficiency, his uniform crisp despite the long ride, captain's bars gleamed on his shoulders. Eva recognized the type, career military. A man who followed orders without question and expected the same from others. "I am Captain Jeremiah Morse," he called out. "I come under flag of truce to parley with your chief." Tashawicka stepped forward, his bearing regal despite the simple buckskin clothes. Behind him, warriors flanked out in careful formation. Their weapons remained lowered, but ready. "You are far from your fort, soldier. I am here on official business. We have reports of stolen property in this camp." The words hit Eva like stones. Property. After everything she had become, everything she had built, she was still property in their eyes. "We have stolen nothing," Tashawicka replied. "We seek a runaway woman. Her name is Eva Crow. She was taken from a plantation in Georgia." Eva's breath caught. They knew her name, knew where she had come from. Someone had been hunting her. "All this time, I know no one by that name." Captain Morse's eyes swept the camp, taking inventory of faces. They passed over Eva once, then returned. She stood among the other women, dressed in buckskin, her hair braided in the Comanche way, but her face was unmistakable. "There," he said, pointing directly at her, "that woman. She matches the description perfectly." All eyes turned to Eva. She felt the weight of their attention like heat from a forge. Nahakoa stepped protectively closer. His hand rested on his knife hilt, casual but threatening. "That is Mava Waraka," Tashawicka said. "She is of the people now. She is a runaway slave. I have legal papers for her return." The captain reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. The paper crackled in the morning air. "Your papers mean nothing here," Tashawicka said. "They mean everything under United States law. This woman is property, stolen from her. Rightful owner." Eva felt something break inside her chest. The careful life she had built, the identity she had claimed, all of it balanced on the edge of a knife. She stepped forward. "I speak for myself," she said in clear, precise English. The sound of her voice shocked everyone. Even the soldiers straightened, not expecting educated speech from someone they saw as chattel. Captain Morse's eyebrows rose. "You can read?" "I can read. I can write. I can speak 3 languages and tend wounds and predict enemy movements." Eva's voice carried across the silent camp. "I am no man's property. The law says otherwise. The law is wrong." The words hung between them like smoke from a grass fire. Captain Morse studied her with new interest. "You've learned to express yourself well for a runaway. I learned to express myself well despite being a slave. Do you deny that you escaped from the Whitmore plantation in Georgia?" Eva's throat constricted. "I deny nothing. I escaped because my husband was murdered for the crime of learning to read. Because my child died of starvation while we fled. Because no place in your civilized world would let me live as a human being." Her voice broke on the last words, but she did not look away. "These people took me in when I was dying. They gave me a name, a purpose, a family. They see me as I am, not as what I was born to be." Captain Morse was quiet for a long moment. Around them, The wind moved through the grass with the sound of distant water. "I sympathize with your circumstances," he said finally, "but I have orders. You will return with me to face the consequences of your actions, and if I refuse, then we will take you by force." The threat crystallized the moment. Ava saw the paths stretching out before her. Return to slavery and certain death. Fight and watch these people she loved die defending her. Run and spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder. "How many innocent people are you willing to kill to drag me back to bondage?" "As many as necessary." The casual brutality of the response hit her like a physical blow. Ava looked around the camp, at Kunai, who had taught her to value her own knowledge, at Tashawika, who had given her dignity when the world refused it, at the children who had learned to write their names in the dirt, at Nahakoa, whose eyes held all the love she had thought lost forever. "I will come with you," she said quietly. "No." Nahakoa's voice was raw with desperation. "Yes." Eva turned to face him. "I will not watch you die for my sake." She walked toward Captain Morse, each step feeling like a small death. Behind her, she heard Nahakoa calling her name, heard the sound of weapons being drawn. "Stop," she called back without turning. "Let me go." Captain Morse watched her approach with something that might have been respect. "You're making the right choice. I am making the only choice that keeps these people alive." "Dismount 2 horses," the captain ordered his men. "The lady will ride with dignity." The word lady struck Eva as absurd. She was property being returned to its owner. But even this man, bound by duty and law, recognized something in her that demanded respect. As she prepared to mount the offered horse, a commotion erupted from the camp. Ayana ran toward them, her face streaked with tears. "Wait," she cried. "Please wait." She fell to her knees before Captain Morse, her words tumbling out in broken English. "I am sorry. I am so sorry I led you here. I left signs for you to follow." The confession hit the gathered crowd like lightning. Ava stared at her, understanding flooding through her like cold water. "You betrayed us. I thought if you were gone, Nahakoa would turn to me. I thought the tribe would be safe. If the outsider left." Ayana's shoulders shook with sobs. "But now I see. You are not the danger. I am." She looked up at Captain Morse. "She saved our lives. She warned us of enemies. She healed our sick. She is more one of us than I am." The captain's face was stone. "Your feelings don't change the law. But they change what is right," Ayana said. Ava felt something shift in the air around them. The confession had altered the balance of the moment. She looked at Captain Morse, really looked at him. Saw the lines around his eyes, the way his mouth was set in a hard line that didn't quite hide his uncertainty. "You have doubts," she said. "I have orders. You have a choice, just as I do." She gestured toward the camp, toward the faces watching them with mixture of fear and hope. "Look at them. Look at what you're threatening to destroy. A peaceful people who harm no one. Children who are learning to read. Women who are mastering new skills." Her voice grew stronger. "You call me property, but I have made myself into something more. I am a teacher, a healer, a protector. I am loved and valued for who I am, not what I can produce." Captain Morse's jaw worked silently. "Is that not what America promises? The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Those rights don't apply to people like you. Then change the people who make those decisions." The words hung between them like a challenge. Eva straightened her shoulders. "I offer you a trade, Captain. My life for their safety. I will return with you willingly if you guarantee these people safe passage to Mexican territory. You're in no position to bargain. I am in the only position that matters. I am the one you want." Captain Morse looked around the camp, taking in the faces of the people Eva was trying to protect. His eyes lingered on the children, on the elders, on the weapons that would be turned against his men if he chose force. You would sacrifice yourself for them. I would sacrifice myself for family. The word family seemed to echo in the morning air. Eva mounted the horse, her back straight, her eyes dry. She had made her choice. Behind her, Nehakoa's voice broke the silence. I will find you, he called. However long it takes, wherever they take you, I will find you. Eva closed her eyes, holding onto the promise like a prayer. The horses began to move, carrying her away from everything she had built toward an uncertain future. But for the first time in her life, she rode as herself. Not as property, not as a victim, but as a woman who had chosen her own sacrifice. The wind carried the scent of sage and distant rain. They rode east for 3 days. Captain Morse kept his word about dignity, allowing Eva to ride unbound. But the soldiers watched her with the wariness of men guarding a caged wolf. Eva said nothing during the journey. She ate when food was offered, slept when they made camp, answered direct questions with single words. But her mind worked constantly, measuring distances, memorizing landmarks, calculating possibilities. On the second night, Captain Morse sat beside her near the fire. The flames cast shadows across his weathered face, making him look older than his years. You're planning something, he said quietly. I am planning nothing. Your eyes never stop moving. You're reading the terrain, judging the men, looking for weakness. Eva met his gaze steadily. Would you not do the same? Probably. He stirred the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the darkness. You're not what I expected to find. What did you expect? A frightened runaway. Someone grateful to be rescued from savages. Eva's laugh was bitter as winter wind. Rescued. Is that what you call dragging someone away from their family? They're not your family. They chose me. I chose them. What makes family if not choice? Captain Morse was quiet for a long moment. I have been a soldier for 20 years. I have followed orders that made me sick to my stomach. But I follow them because without law, without order, there is only chaos. And whose law? Whose order? The law that says I am property. The order that killed my husband for learning to read. The law is imperfect, but it is what we have. Then change it. Eva stood and walked to the edge of the firelight. Above them, stars wheeled in patterns that had guided travelers for thousands of years. Somewhere under that same sky, Nehakoa was grieving her loss. I cannot change the law, Captain Morse said behind her. But I can choose how I enforce it. Something in his tone made Eva turn. Meaning accidents happen. Rivers are dangerous. Bodies are sometimes lost. Eva's heart began to pound. You would risk your career? I would risk my career to sleep at night. The third day brought them to a river crossing. The water ran swift and deep, swollen by recent rains. Captain Morse ordered a halt to study the current. Treacherous crossing, he said to his sergeant. We'll need to be careful. The sergeant nodded, but Eva caught the glance that passed between them. Understanding flowed through her like electricity. Can you swim? Captain Morse asked her quietly. Yes. Good. Stay close to your horse. If you fall in, let the current carry you downstream. Don't fight it. He handed her a small, waterproof pouch. Papers, new identity. Eva Crow died crossing this river. Maria Santos lives in Mexico. Eva's hands trembled as she took the pouch. Why? Because some things matter more than orders. They entered the water in single file. The current was stronger. Then it looked, pulling at the horse's legs, making them struggle for footing. Halfway across, Eva's horse stumbled. She slipped from the saddle with a cry that carried across the water, the sound echoing off the rocky banks. The current swept her downstream, her head bobbing in the churning water. Captain Morse shouted orders, sending men to search the banks. For an hour, they combed the shoreline. found nothing but swift water and unforgiving stone. "She's gone," the sergeant reported. "Current took her." Captain Morse stared at the water for a long moment. "Mark it in the log. Prisoner lost during river crossing. Presumed drowned." "Yes, sir. We ride for the fort." 2 miles downstream, Eva dragged herself onto a sandbar. Her clothes were torn, her body battered by rocks and debris. But she was alive. She was free. The journey south took weeks. Eva traveled by night, slept in hidden places, lived on wild plants and small game. The skills Quinay had taught her kept her alive. She crossed into Mexico on a moonless night, her feet finally touching soil where no man could claim ownership of her body. The refugee camp was a collection of ramshackle shelters housing escaped slaves, displaced Indians, and others who had fled the violence of the borderlands. Eva found work as a translator, her knowledge of English, Spanish, and Comanche, making her valuable to the community. But she lived for the horizon, scanning it daily for familiar riders. They came with the spring rains. A small band of Comanche moving carefully through the scrubland, their horses tired from long travel. Eva saw them first from the well where she was drawing water. Her heart stopped, then began beating so fast she could barely breathe. Nahakoa sat his horse at the group's head, his eyes scanning the camp with desperate intensity. Behind him rode Tashawika, Quinay, and a handful of others, and Ayana, whose betrayal had driven them all from their homeland. Eva set down her water bucket and walked toward them, her steps quickening with each heartbeat. Nahakoa saw her when she was still 50 yards away. He dismounted before his horse had stopped moving, running toward her with abandon. They collided in the middle of the dusty street, her arms wrapping around his neck, his lifting her off her feet. Neither spoke. There were no words for what they felt. When they finally pulled apart, Eva saw tears on his cheeks. "I told you. I would find you," he whispered. "I knew you would." That night, the band made camp beside the refugee settlement. Eva moved among them, reacquainting herself with faces she had thought lost forever. Quinay embraced her with the fierce joy of a mother reclaiming a lost child. "You are different," the medicine woman observed. "Stronger. I learned to choose my own path." "Good. You will need that strength for what comes next." Around the fire, they shared stories of their journey. How they had evaded army patrols, crossed hostile territory, survived on hope and determination. Ayana sat apart from the group, her face drawn with shame and grief. Eva approached her slowly. "Why did you come?" "To ask forgiveness. And if I cannot give it, then I will live with that burden." Eva studied the younger woman's face. Saw genuine remorse there, and the kind of pain that comes from understanding the true cost of one's actions. "Forgiveness is not mine to give or withhold," Eva said finally. "It is something we must each find for ourselves." Ayana nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. A month later, Eva stood before a gathering of refugees, teaching children to read and write. Her hands moved across a piece of bark, forming letters that captured the sound of their voices. In the back of the group, Nahakoa watched her work, his face radiant with pride. Eva's belly was beginning to show the curve of new life. Their child who would be born free under the vast Mexican sky. After the lesson, she walked to the edge of the settlement. The sun was setting, painting the western horizon in shades of gold and crimson. Her wedding ring hung on a cord around her neck, no longer a symbol of loss, but a reminder of the journey that had brought her home. She was no longer the broken woman who had traded herself for food. She was Mamuua Waraka, Black Eagle woman, teacher and healer, wife and mother-to-be. She had found her place in the world, not by asking permission, but by creating it through choice and courage. The wind carried the scent of sage and distant rain. Behind her, the sounds of evening life began. Children playing, adults talking, the eternal rhythm of people building tomorrow from the fragments of today. Ava touched her belly, feeling the flutter of new life within. She had given her child the greatest gift possible, the right to choose their own future. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from, perhaps. We will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.